Yo, welcome back to another book review. Today we're going to be talking about Boomtown by Sam Anderson. And for those of you unfamiliar, Boomtown is a book story about the history of Oklahoma City. It also kind of depicts the renaissance that the city has undergone over the last 10 years due to the importation of the Seattle Supersonics. And this book was written by Sam. He's a staff writer, I believe, at the New York Times. He's written a couple of books before, and I just want to start off by just kind of saying a couple good things about Sam as an author. Number one, he's able to depict sports and write about sports in a way that's very entertaining, which I thought is very difficult to do. I'm not a very big sports reader, but whenever he writes about, him watching Oklahoma City play, whether it be James Harden or the way he describes Russell Westbrook, it's very captivating and it's very vivid. And this also just goes to a general compliment about Sam as a writer. He has prolific prose, very descriptive, very much makes the reader feel like they're there in the moment. And kind of have a sense of all things that are going on, whether it be sound, smells, sight, right? And he's just extremely talented. So could not speak more highly of the entertainment value of this book. And I decided to pick this book up, one, because I'm from Oklahoma, obviously. I live in Oklahoma City, and so I found it very valuable just to learn about the city from this book. And I learned parts about Oklahoma history that I didn't even know about, things that aren't taught in the school system, and we'll get into some of those things a little bit later in the video. But I want to start off by talking about how Sam describes Oklahoma, right? And there's a theme within this book. The theme is that of tragedy, in my opinion, right? And I think that, here's a couple of quotes I want to read to you guys. So he talks about the whole airport is named after him, Will Rogers World Airport. World is meaningless here because there is actually no international flights. It's just another example of one of Oklahoma City's defining behaviors, trying to make itself seem bigger than it is. Oklahoma is completely devoted to sucking fossil fuels up out of the ground and unembarrassed about its devotion. And then this is the last one. It would have to be a place, so this is talking about Operation Bongo 2. So this was in the 60s, whenever politicians decided, hey, we really wanted some funds from the government. We really wanted people to come to Oklahoma City. So we volunteered our state to be the training grounds for these supersonic jets, right? So they were just massively disruptive, created a whole bunch of noise. And so this is how he describes Oklahomans. It would have to be a place desperate to improve its standing in the world, a place whose power brokers had enough control to bypass the traditional governmental strictures that would normally slow things down, a place where the media had been trained to play along, where residents had been conditioned to suffer for the common good. It would have to be a place where people had grown accustomed over the course of generations to sudden violence erupting from the sky, right? So I thought that it was just a really prolific way to describe Oklahomans, and also to speak at the ethos of the people, and through tragedy, through our ability to withstand storms and tornadoes, right? Very much a part of living in Oklahoma. The descendants of the Dust Bowl, right? So people who are very resilient and willing to fight in the common interest and self-sacrifice, right? These are all very much Oklahoman values. Labor conquers all, right? That's our motto around here. And so what's very interesting is to learn about the history of the founding of Oklahoma City, right? Excuse me. So I think that the book is kind of broken up into three historical time periods. There's the late 1800s, the mid 1900s, and then what I'd say more modern day, present day. So there's three historical figures from the late 1800s that really shaped Oklahoma City, and that's Angelo Scott, David Payne, and William Couch. Angelo Scott, he was actually the dean of Oklahoma City University, which was named Epworth University at the time or something like that. That's actually where we're located right now, is Oklahoma City University. So he was just a very monumental figure, and he was able to lead Oklahoma City through a very chaotic time in its history in terms of the settlement of the land, right? And so this is how This is how Oklahoma's land or settling is described in the book. The founding of Oklahoma City, he wrote, was the most disorderly episode of urban settlement this country and perhaps the world has ever witnessed. Right? So you learn in the book about a guy named David Payne, who this guy is an outlaw. He's living in the late 1800s. He's kind of doing his own thing. He has this group of people who are going to unassigned lands and trying to like map off plots of land and sell them to people and kind of get ahead of the gang of Western expansion at the time. And he's very much living outside the law. And he comes to Oklahoma. He's eventually moved off of the lands by the federal government. He dies, and then he has a replacement, a guy named William Couch. And William Couch sets up this company with a bunch of people, and the name of it is the Seminole Town Improvement Company, and they have ambitions to, whenever the land run starts, to come in Oklahoma City. They already have things mapped out, and they're going to just stake their claim to the city, really, and sell the plots of land. And you had a competing company known as the Oklahoma Town Company who had the exact same idea, right? And so whenever the land run began, these two, everyone just swarms into no man's land, starts staking off 160 acres. People are claiming the same land, right? You can imagine how extremely chaotic this is. And then you had these people who had snuck in earlier, known as the Sooners, or the Sooners, and because they had kind of cut the line. And I don't know if I said this, but Payne's people were known as the Boomers, right? So this is where OU, the Boomer-Sooner comes from. But you had people who came in early, who beat the bell, who jumped the gun, and these two companies in particular fight for the heart of Oklahoma City. And Anderson goes on to explain how it explains the disarray and just how downtown Oklahoma City makes no sense. If you get down towards the Bricktown area, the way the roads are all mapped up, it's actually the result of these two companies trying to come to some agreement because they mapped out the city differently and neither of them were willing to budge. And Angela Scott was very paramount in leading the city through that time. And so skipping forward into the 1900s, I learned about three historical figures I had never knew of before. Clara Looper. Actually, I had heard of Clara before. I had learned about her last semester in one of my classes, but Roscoe Dungy and Stanley Draper, right? So who are these people? Clara was a civil rights activist, and she led a bunch of sit-ins in downtown Oklahoma City after taking a group of students to Washington, D.C. They saw what they saw the promised land. They saw what it looks like for black and white people to work and live and dine and eat in the same place, and they wanted that here in Oklahoma. So they organized some nonviolent protests, and you learn about how Clara was just extremely resilient in fighting for her cause. She was a member of Calvary Baptist Church, which actually still exists on off Walnut Street, I believe, today. So it's just really cool to read about history, but it'd be like, oh wait, I pass that every day. And then you also learn about Roscoe Dungy, who was a writer during the time. He wrote for he was the editor of a magazine called The Black Dispatch, and this was a publication that advocated for black entrepreneurship, causes or events in the black community. It very much was political in nature, encouraging people to take up to the ballot box, right? And then you also learn about Stanley Draper, who moved to Oklahoma City in, I believe it was 1919. He moves here and he becomes just a massive shaker in the history of Oklahoma. He's responsible for what they call the annexation of Oklahoma City, right? So I think I actually have, I definitely have. Yep, so here we go. On page 170, he believed religiously that a place wasn't just somewhere you happened to live. It was your identity, your spiritual context, the very reason for your being, right? So this is how Draper views the world and how he views your place of domicile. And he very much is responsible for the growth and acceleration of growth of Oklahoma City. He's responsible for bringing Tinker Air Force Base to Oklahoma City. He was president and head of membership recruitment of the Chamber of Commerce. And for those people who still live in Oklahoma, they know that the Chamber of Commerce is still a very important institution in the way they are able to bridge the political and the business aspects of Oklahoma City, right? I just learned a lot. I learned about, urban planning with this guy named Payne, P-E-I, who they tried to get to map out a plan for urbanization of Oklahoma City. I think some of the plans went through, some didn't. You learn about the racial relations and racial tensions and the history of segregation and history of violence in Oklahoma City that is, I think, very much overlooked in the history books. You have to take, I think it's 8th grade or 9th grade here in the state, you have to take Oklahoma history. And I was just very shocked that the stories of Clara Luper, Roscoe Dunjee, and Stanley Draper are not included in that teaching, because these are historical figures. Particularly, Roscoe Dunjee and Clara Luper are great black historical figures, and there's not many to be talked about or that are talked about in the school system. And I think that that's a disservice to our young people in the state. But anyways, going on to more modern day, right? One of the sort of epitomes of Oklahoma City is the I Love Capitalism Museum, which I think is also just kind of, emblematic of that self-sacrifice and labor conquers all, that spirit of Oklahoma City. Sam talks about that on page 271. But he also tells the story of Wayne Coyne, who longtime resident of Oklahoma City, lead singer of the Flaming Lips. He talks about his relationship to the city and its, his cyclical, I would say, relationship to the politicians and the growth, but how he's very much just like a flame, pun intended. But no, really, he's a shining light in the city and someone who brings like a certain edge to the city, especially as we go through this urbanization, gentrification, revitalization, renaissance, right? He has been paramount to creating that electric energy that Oklahoma City is becoming well known for, and just being able to, he started like an art museum. He's done a whole bunch of different things. He like painted rainbow on the streets like of Oklahoma City, just completely breaking rules and just doing his own thing. But he gets away with it because he's a superstar. And you also learn about Gary England, right? Anyone who's from Oklahoma knows about Gary England. He's like Oklahoma's guy, like the weatherman, the guy who keeps you informed about the storms. And I really liked reading about some of the storms and the tragedies of Oklahoma City. Sam does just a really good job at capturing that, and I'm seeing if I can find any good parts, but I don't want to make this video too much longer, so I'm going to try and wrap this up by, obviously, I think two of the last figures that were important in this book, just of note here in the video, would be Sam Presti, who is the general manager of the Oklahoma City Thunder. He talks about the process, and he talks about getting to like interview all these Oklahoma City Thunder players, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. He talks about that entire period of the Oklahoma City Thunder and how we were going through this boom. And, again, that theme of tragedy, he kind of mocks Oklahoma City to a certain degree in the book, saying like, it's a history of people sort of like the city getting ahead of itself with its expectations, whether that be with the oil boom and bust, but a city that is very much used to disappointment, he says. And, as we sort of rebuild the Oklahoma City Thunder right now, Sam Presti is obviously a key figure, and a lot of people really admire him and like what he's done for the city, along with, the Aubrey McClendons of the world, and the Clay Bennett's of the world, who were the modern day Medici, if you will, of Oklahoma City, very paramount in bringing our Angelos, in the form of Russell Westbrook, if you will, Michelangelo. Yeah, did you guys get that analogy? Anyways, and you also learn about the tragedies of Oklahoma City, of 1994 bombing, that took place downtown. You learn about the relationship between MAPS, which is the metro area project that was like kind of pushed through by Ron Norick, one of our former governors during that time, and sort of the relationship between that urban revitalization and that great tragedy. And you learn that all the players of the Oklahoma City Thunder actually have to go visit the memorial of that, of the bombing before they're able to step foot on the court. And you really just get an understanding of how it still lingers in the ethos and is still so centrally important to the resilience and spirit of Oklahoma City and Oklahomans, in my opinion. And yeah, I thought that, the discussion around MAPS was also very timely, because yesterday the city of Oklahoma just, voted to update MAPS, and that went through positively, which is like very, at the time that MAPS was introduced by Ron, it was like just something that people didn't really expect, because it was a tax, it was a public tax, and Oklahomans are very much against government or large government and centrally planned committees type of thing. That's definitely part of the ethos, I'd say, of what it means to be an Okie. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, I do know. I wanted to read my favorite part is whenever Sam, meets Russell Westbrook, right? And I just like some of these quotes, and I'm just going to kind of read very briefly because I am a huge Westbrook fan. On the court, he was ferociously, maniacally, relentlessly assertive. Almost certainly the least deferential human in the arena. He attacked and attacked, even when it made no sense, even when it meant ignoring wide-open teammates to force his own rash shot over multiple defenders. It was a risky, impulsive, individualistic move, by its very nature a gamble, but Westbrook made the shot with surprising frequency. Yeah, so it's just Every such moment, of course, only confirmed Westbrook's radical self-belief, increasing the likelihood that he would do it again the next time down the floor. So he's talking about like his wild play style. By traditional standards, saying the kinds of things Westbrook was saying is bad form. But that's the same way that by traditional basketball standards, it's bad form to charge into 1-on-4 fast break and pull up for a contested free throw line jumper until Westbrook, as he regularly does, somehow pulls it off. He was a social gambler as well, a basketball gambler, one of those people who knows how to play on the line between charisma and rudeness, teasing the affection. This was the paradox of Russell Westbrook. What looked like chaos was built on a foundation of intense self-control. When he looked wild on the court, it was only the flip side of his focus. His mind could reduce the entire universe to one immediate goal, outside of which everything, teammates, opponents, fans, journalists, shrank to nothing. So I'll leave it at that, guys. I highly recommend this book. I think it's a must-read. It should be part of Oklahoma school curriculum. 5 out of 5. Can't speak more highly of it. I hope this was entertaining. Hope you guys learned something about Oklahoma. Let me know what you think. If you've read the book, if you haven't read the book, now hopefully you've been inspired to come visit Oklahoma City. Hit me up if you do. Peace.